What would you do if saving one life changed everything you thought you knew about the world?
Sarah Martinez thought she was just helping a wounded soldier on a quiet Tuesday morning. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness would pull her into a web of government secrets, put her family in danger, and force her to question everything she believed about the people sworn to protect her country. Sometimes the most ordinary people become heroes not by choice, but because heroes are exactly what the world needs at that moment.
What would you do if saving one life changed everything you thought you knew about the world?
Sarah Martinez thought she was just helping a wounded soldier on a quiet Tuesday morning. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness would pull her into a web of government secrets, put her family in danger, and force her to question everything she believed about the people sworn to protect her country. Sometimes the most ordinary people become heroes not by choice, but because heroes are exactly what the world needs at that moment. Sarah Martinez stepped out of her apartment building at 6:30 a.m., coffee in hand, ready for another long shift at Denver General Hospital. The morning air was crisp, and the street was unusually quiet for a Tuesday. As a trauma nurse with 12 years of experience, Sarah had learned to appreciate these peaceful moments.
They never lasted long.
She was walking toward her car when she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was a groan, low and pained, coming from the alley beside her building.
Sarah's medical training kicked in immediately.
She set down her coffee and moved toward the sound, her heart already racing.
What she found changed everything.
A man in military fatigues lay crumpled behind a dumpster, blood soaking through his uniform. He was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and a face pale from blood loss. Sarah knelt beside him immediately, her hands moving to check for wounds.
"Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, pulling out her phone to call 911.
But the soldier's hand shot up and grabbed her wrist. "No," he whispered, his voice urgent despite his weakness.
"No police. No ambulance. They'll kill me."
Sarah stared at him, confused.
"You're hurt badly. You need medical attention." "You're a nurse," he said, noticing her hospital ID badge. "I can tell. Please, just help me stop the bleeding. Then, I have to go."
Something in his eyes convinced her. Maybe it was the fear she saw there, or the way his hand trembled as he held her wrist.
Against her better judgment, Sarah nodded.
"I need to get my medical bag from my car," she said.
"Don't move."
She ran to her vehicle and grabbed the emergency kit she always kept in her trunk. When she returned, the soldier was trying to sit up against the brick wall.
"Stay down," Sarah ordered, putting on latex gloves. "Let me see where you're hurt."
The bullet wound was in his left shoulder, and, from the look of it, the bullet had gone straight through. Lucky for him, it had missed major arteries. Sarah worked quickly, cleaning the wound and applying pressure bandages. "What's your name?" she asked as she worked.
"Marcus," he said. "Marcus Thompson.
Staff Sergeant, Army Rangers."
"Okay, Marcus.
This is going to hurt, but I need to clean this properly." As Sarah treated his wound, Marcus spoke in urgent whispers.
"Listen carefully. There's something you need to know.
Something big is happening, and innocent people are going to die if someone doesn't stop it." Sarah kept working, but she listened.
"What are you talking about?"
"Operation Nightfall," Marcus said, wincing as she tightened the bandage.
"It's not what they told us it was.
We thought we were protecting American interests overseas, but we were just helping rich people get richer. And, when I tried to report what we found, they tried to kill me."
Sarah sat back on her heels, staring at him. "Who tried to kill you?"
"My own unit," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper.
"The people I trusted with my life.
They shot me and left me for dead because I wouldn't keep quiet about what we discovered." Before Sarah could ask more questions, she heard the sound of vehicles approaching.
Multiple vehicles, moving fast.
Marcus's eyes went wide with terror.
"They found me," he said. "You need to get away from here. Now." But it was too late.
3 black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up to the end of the alley, blocking both exits.
Men in dark suits got out, moving with military precision.
They weren't wearing uniforms, but Sarah could tell they were some kind of government agents. "Step away from the soldier, ma'am," one of them called out as they approached. He was tall and thin, with cold gray eyes and a voice that demanded obedience. Sarah stood up slowly, her hands shaking.
"This man needs medical attention. He's been shot."
"We'll take care of him," the agent said.
"You need to leave. Now."
Two other agents moved past Sarah and grabbed Marcus under his arms. Despite his injuries, he struggled against them.
"This is wrong," Sarah said, finding her courage. "He's hurt. He needs a hospital."
The lead agent stepped closer to her, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Listen very carefully, Miss Martinez. You were never here.
You never saw this man. You never had this conversation. Do you understand?"
Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
How did he know her name? She hadn't told anyone who she was. "I understand," she said, knowing she had no choice.
"Good," the agent said. "Because if you ever speak about what happened here, if you ever try to contact Staff Sergeant Thompson, or if you ever mention Operation Nightfall to anyone, there will be consequences.
Serious consequences. Not just for you, but for your daughter Emma as well."
The mention of her daughter's name hit Sarah like a physical blow.
Emma was only 8 years old, safe at her grandmother's house across town. How did these people know about her family?
The agents loaded Marcus into one of the SUVs. As they drove away, he looked back at Sarah through the rear window. Even from a distance, she could see the desperation in his eyes. Sarah stood alone in the alley for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Her medical training told her to report this incident, but the agent's threats echoed in her mind. These weren't ordinary criminals. These were people with power, people who knew where she lived and where her daughter was. She picked up her medical bag and started walking back to her car, her hands still shaking.
That's when she noticed something that hadn't been there before.
A small object had fallen out when she opened her bag.
It was a flash drive, no bigger than her thumb. Sarah looked around quickly, then picked it up.
Marcus must have slipped it into her bag while she was treating him. The smart thing would be to throw it away, to pretend she had never found it. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the look in Marcus's eyes, or the way those agents had threatened her daughter. Maybe it was just her stubborn refusal to be intimidated by bullies, no matter how powerful they were. Whatever the reason, Sarah put the flash drive in her pocket. She drove to work in a daze, going through the motions of her job while her mind raced with questions.
Who was Marcus Thompson really? What was Operation Nightfall? And what was on the flash drive that was so important that people were willing to kill for it? During her lunch break, Sarah went to the hospital's computer lab.
She looked around to make sure she was alone, then plugged in the flash drive. Her heart pounded as files began to appear on the screen. What she saw made her blood run cold.
There were photographs, documents, and video files.
The photos showed military operations in countries she couldn't identify, but the faces in the images told a story of violence and chaos. The documents contained orders and communications that seemed to describe missions targeting civilian populations.
One video file caught her attention.
It was labeled Kandahar_truth.mp4. Sarah clicked on it, and her world changed forever. The video showed American soldiers, including Marcus, in what looked like an Afghan village. But instead of fighting terrorists, they were destroying homes and terrorizing families. The audio was poor, but Sarah could hear orders being given to eliminate witnesses and destroy evidence of civilian casualties. Sarah felt sick to her stomach.
This wasn't the American military she thought she knew.
This was something else entirely, something dark and wrong. She was so absorbed in the files that she almost didn't notice the shadow that fell across the computer screen. Sarah looked up to see Dr. James Reeves, the hospital's chief of staff, standing behind her. "Interesting reading material, Sarah," he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Sarah quickly closed the files and removed the flash drive.
"Just checking my email," she said, trying to sound normal.
Dr. Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know, Sarah, sometimes it's better not to be too curious about things that don't concern us.
Don't you agree?
The way he said it made Sarah's skin crawl.
It sounded almost like a warning.
Of course, Dr. Reeves.
I should get back to work.
Yes, you should, he said, walking away.
And, Sarah? Be careful.
Denver can be a dangerous city for people who aren't careful. Sarah sat at the computer for another minute, her heart racing.
How many people were involved in this conspiracy? How far did it reach?
She looked around the familiar hospital corridors and wondered who else might be watching her. That evening, Sarah picked up Emma from her grandmother's house as usual. She tried to act normal, playing games and helping with homework, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched.
After Emma went to bed, Sarah sat in her kitchen with the flash drive in her hands.
She thought about the agent's threats, about Dr. Reeves's warning, about the dangerous world she had stumbled into by trying to help an injured man. But she also thought about Marcus Thompson, who had risked his life to expose the truth. She thought about the families in those videos, innocent people who had been hurt by operations carried out in America's name. She thought about what kind of world she wanted her daughter to grow up in. Sarah made her decision. She couldn't pretend this had never happened. She couldn't ignore what she had seen. Somehow, she had to find a way to help Marcus and expose the truth about Operation Nightfall. She just had no idea how dangerous that decision would make her life, or how many people would try to stop her from doing the right thing. As she sat in her quiet kitchen, Sarah Martinez had no way of knowing that by tomorrow, everything she thought she knew about her safe, ordinary life would be turned upside down. The flash drive felt heavy in her hand, like it contained the weight of the world. In many ways, it did. And, now, whether she wanted it or not, that weight was hers to carry. Outside her apartment building, a black sedan sat in the shadows. Inside, two men watched her windows and spoke quietly into radio headsets. The hunt had already begun, and Sarah Martinez was now a target. But she was also something the conspirators hadn't counted on. She was a mother who would do anything to protect her child, a nurse who had sworn to help people, and a woman who refused to be intimidated by those who abused their power. The game had changed, and Sarah didn't even know she was playing it. But she would learn, and when she did, the people who thought they could silence her would discover that they had made a very dangerous mistake. The truth has a way of fighting back, and sometimes it chooses the most unlikely champions. Sarah Martinez was about to become one of them, whether she was ready or not. Sarah woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps in her hallway. She lay perfectly still, listening, her heart pounding so loud she was sure whoever was out there could hear it. The footsteps were careful, deliberate, the kind someone makes when they're trying not to be heard. She reached for her phone, but then she heard Emma's door creak open. Sarah shot out of bed and moved quietly to her bedroom door, pressing her ear against it. She could hear whispered voices, but couldn't make out the words.
The footsteps moved away from Emma's room and towards Sarah's door.
She grabbed a baseball bat from her closet and positioned herself behind the door, ready to fight for her daughter's life. But then, the footsteps retreated, and she heard the front door close softly. Sarah waited another 10 minutes before checking on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the danger that had just passed through their home. In the morning, Sarah found the evidence of their midnight visitors. Her desk drawers had been carefully searched and reorganized. Her laptop was still there, but it had been moved slightly.
Someone had gone through her things, looking for something specific. The flash drive.
They were looking for the flash drive.
Sarah had hidden it inside an old medicine bottle in her bathroom cabinet.
When she checked, it was still there, but she knew she couldn't keep it in the apartment anymore.
It was too dangerous. At work, things got even stranger.
Dr. Reeves appeared at her station 3 times during her shift, always with some excuse about patient care, but his eyes kept scanning her workspace. During lunch, Sarah noticed a man in a maintenance uniform cleaning the same section of hallway for over an hour, always positioning himself where he could watch her.
When Sarah left the hospital that evening, she spotted the black sedan following her.
It stayed several cars back, but it was definitely following her route. Sarah had grown up in Denver and knew the streets well. She took a series of random turns, confirming her suspicions. The sedan stayed with her every move. Instead of going home, Sarah drove to a busy shopping center and parked in the crowded lot. She went inside and called her grandmother from a pay phone.
"Grandma Rita, it's Sarah. I need you to keep Emma overnight again.
Tell her I have to work a double shift." "Of course, dear," her grandmother said.
"Is everything all right? You sound worried." "Everything's fine," Sarah lied. "I'll explain later."
Sarah left the mall through a different exit and took a taxi home, leaving her car in the parking lot. If someone was tracking her vehicle, this might buy her some time. Back in her apartment, Sarah felt like a prisoner in her own home. She closed all the curtains and tried to think clearly about what to do next. She needed to understand what was on that flash drive, but she couldn't risk using her own computer or any computer that could be traced back to her.
That's when she remembered Tony Valdez. Tony had been her neighbor for 3 years before moving across town. He was a freelance computer programmer who specialized in data recovery and digital security. More importantly, he was someone who understood the value of privacy and didn't ask too many questions. Sarah called Tony from another pay phone the next morning. "Tony, it's Sarah Martinez.
I need a favor, and it might be dangerous."
"Dangerous how?"
Tony asked, his voice immediately serious.
"I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere public? Somewhere with lots of people?"
They agreed to meet at Union Station during the morning rush hour. Sarah arrived early and positioned herself where she could watch for anyone following her. When Tony showed up, she quickly explained the situation without going into too much detail. "So you have a flash drive with sensitive information, and someone's trying to get it back," Tony summarized.
"And you need to know what's on it." "Exactly.
But it has to be completely anonymous.
No connection to you or me." Tony thought for a moment. "I have a setup in a storage unit across town. It's completely off the grid, no internet connection, no way to trace it."
"But, Sarah, if this is as serious as you're making it sound, maybe you should just turn it over to the police."
"I don't think I can trust the police," Sarah said. "I don't know how many people are involved in this."
Tony studied her face and nodded.
"Okay. Give me 2 hours." While Tony examined the flash drive, Sarah went to the public library and started researching Operation Nightfall.
What she found was mostly classified information and news articles that raised more questions than they answered. She discovered that Operation Nightfall was supposed to be a counter-terrorism mission in Afghanistan, but the official reports were vague and contradictory. Some sources suggested it involved special operations forces, while others mentioned civilian contractors. What was most disturbing was how little information was available for an operation that had supposedly been ongoing for over 2 years.
Sarah also researched Marcus Thompson.
She found his military record, which showed a decorated soldier with multiple tours of duty and commendations for bravery. But there was a gap in his service record over the past 18 months, with no explanation for where he had been or what he had been doing. When Sarah returned to the storage unit, Tony's face was pale. "Sarah, what the hell have you gotten yourself into?" he asked.
"What did you find?"
Tony showed her his laptop screen, which displayed dozens of files and folders.
"This is massive.
There are financial records, communication logs, video evidence, photographs, everything. And it's all about something called the Cerberus Group."
"Cerberus Group?"
"It's a private military contractor," Tony explained. "According to these files, they've been using Operation Nightfall as cover for illegal activities."
"They're not fighting terrorists, Sarah.
They're running protection rackets, stealing resources, and eliminating anyone who gets in their way." Sarah felt sick as Tony showed her more files.
There were bank records showing millions of dollars being moved through offshore accounts.
There were communications between military officers and corporate executives discussing how to maximize profits from conflict zones. most horrifying were the videos and photographs showing the aftermath of operations that had nothing to do with fighting terrorism. This Marcus guy, Tony said, he wasn't just a whistleblower. He was gathering evidence for months, building a case that could bring down dozens of people in the military, government, and private sector.
No wonder they want him dead, Sarah whispered. Sarah, this is bigger than we thought.
These people have unlimited resources and no conscience.
If they know you have this information, they won't stop until they get it back or eliminate you.
As if to prove his point, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number.
We know where you are. We know where your daughter is. You have 24 hours to return our property. Sarah's hands shook as she showed the message to Tony. I have to get Emma somewhere safe. Where? If they can find you this easily, they can find your family too. That's when Sarah's phone rang.
The caller ID showed her grandmother's number, but when she answered, it wasn't her grandmother's voice.
Miss Martinez, said the familiar cold voice of the agent from the alley.
I told you there would be consequences if you didn't forget what you saw.
Where's my grandmother? Sarah demanded. She's safe. For now. Your daughter is at school, also safe for now.
Whether they stay that way depends entirely on your cooperation.
What do you want? You know what we want.
The storage device staff Sergeant Thompson gave you.
Return it, and your family will remain unharmed. How do I know you'll keep your word? The agent laughed coldly. You don't. But you don't have a choice. There's a trash can outside the main entrance to Denver General Hospital.
Put the device in a brown paper bag and leave it there at exactly 6 p.m. today.
Come alone. Don't make copies. Don't tell anyone. If you follow these instructions, you and your family will be left alone. The line went dead.
Sarah stared at her phone, her mind racing.
What are you going to do? Tony asked. I don't know.
If I give them the flash drive, they'll probably kill Marcus and everyone else who knows about this.
But if I don't, they'll hurt my family.
Maybe there's a third option, Tony said slowly.
What if we make sure this information gets out before you hand over the drive? What do you mean?
I mean we copy everything and send it to every news organization, government watchdog group, and international human rights organization we can think of.
Make it public before they can stop us. Sarah thought about it.
It was risky, but it might be the only way to protect everyone.
How long would that take? Give me 3 hours to upload everything anonymously to multiple secure servers.
Once it's out there, the information becomes worthless to them. They might still be angry, but they won't have a reason to hurt you or your family.
It was a desperate plan, but it was better than just giving up.
Sarah agreed, and Tony got to work.
While Tony uploaded files, Sarah went to Emma's school.
She told the principal there was a family emergency and took her daughter out early. Then, she drove to her grandmother's house, where she found Rita Martinez tied up but unharmed in her living room.
Grandma, are you okay? Sarah asked, cutting the ropes.
I'm fine, dear, Rita said, though she was obviously shaken. Those men said they just wanted to make sure we stayed put.
They didn't hurt me, but, Sarah, what's going on?
Sarah helped her grandmother to a chair and quickly explained what had happened.
Rita listened with growing alarm. You need to take Emma somewhere safe, Rita said. Somewhere these people can't find her. Where? They seem to know everything about us.
Rita thought for a moment, then went to an old jewelry box on her dresser. She pulled out a business card that looked like it had been there for years. Call this number, she said.
Ask for Miguel Santos. Tell him Rita Gutierrez needs help. He'll know what to do. Who is Miguel Santos? Someone who understands what it's like to fight powerful enemies, Rita said.
Someone who helped me once, a long time ago, when your grandfather was in trouble. Sarah had never heard this story before, but there was no time for questions. She took the card and gathered Emma's things.
Where are we going, Mom? Emma asked as they left Rita's house.
On an adventure, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm.
We're going to meet some new friends.
The phone number on the card led to a small auto repair shop on the outskirts of Denver. When Sarah asked for Miguel Santos, she was led to a back office where a man in his 60s was working on engine parts. Miguel looked up when Sarah entered, and she saw recognition in his eyes when she mentioned her grandmother's name.
Rita's granddaughter, he said with a slight accent.
She called and told me you might need help. She said you're in trouble with powerful people who don't like the truth.
That's right, Sarah said.
These people have threatened my family, and I don't know where else to turn.
Miguel studied her for a moment, then nodded.
Rita saved my son's life once, when the police wouldn't listen and the courts wouldn't help.
I owe her a debt that can never be repaid. If she says you need help, then you have it. I don't understand. How can you help?
Because I'm not the only one who owes Rita a debt, Miguel said. And because sometimes people who fight for the truth need to disappear for a while.
Miguel made a phone call, speaking rapidly in Spanish.
When he hung up, he turned back to Sarah.
There are people coming to help you. People who have experience with situations like yours.
But first, you need to know something important.
What?
The man you helped, Marcus Thompson.
He's not dead.
He escaped from those government agents, and he's been trying to contact you.
Sarah's heart leaped. He's alive? How do you know?
Because he's the one who told Rita to give you my number, Miguel said.
He's been watching over you and your family, trying to keep you safe while he gathers more evidence.
Before Sarah could ask more questions, her phone buzzed with a text from Tony, upload complete.
Information is now public. Check the news. Sarah turned on the television in Miguel's office and found breaking news reports on every channel.
The story was already spreading across the internet faster than anyone could contain it. Operation Nightfall exposed, military contractor accused of war crimes, leaked documents reveal systematic cover-up of civilian deaths, government officials implicated in illegal arms deals. The evidence was overwhelming, and it was everywhere. There was no putting this genie back in the bottle.
Sarah's phone rang again.
It was the same agent who had threatened her earlier, but his voice was different now. Instead of cold confidence, she heard barely controlled rage. You made a very big mistake, Miss Martinez.
No, Sarah said, feeling brave for the first time in days. You made the mistake. You thought you could silence the truth by threatening innocent people. But the truth doesn't belong to you. It belongs to everyone. This isn't over, the agent said.
You may have won this round, but there will be consequences.
We know where you live. We know where you work. We know everyone you care about.
Then, you also know that harming me or my family now will only make you look more guilty, Sarah replied.
The whole world is watching now. She hung up and turned to Miguel, who was smiling.
You did good, he said.
But he's right about one thing. This isn't over.
These people don't give up easily, and they have long memories.
You're going to need protection until this whole thing gets sorted out. Just then, Sarah heard vehicles approaching outside.
She tensed, thinking it might be the black SUVs again, but Miguel put a reassuring hand on her shoulder.
It's okay, he said. These are the friends I called.
Through the window, Sarah saw 3 pickup trucks pulling into the auto shop's yard. Men and women got out, all of them moving with the same military bearing she had seen in Marcus.
But these people were different. They weren't wearing government suits or trying to intimidate anyone.
They looked like regular people, but there was something about their eyes that said they had seen difficult things and survived them.
A woman approached the office door.
She was in her 30s, with short black hair and a confidence that reminded Sarah of the best nurses she had worked with.
Miguel opened the door for her. Sarah Martinez, Miguel said, I'd like you to meet Maria Santos. She's going to help keep you and your daughter safe. Maria shook Sarah's hand with a firm grip. We need to move quickly, she said. Now that the story is public, both sides are going to be looking for you. The people who want to silence you, and the people who want to use you as a symbol. What do you mean? Sarah asked.
You've become the face of this story, Maria explained.
The brave nurse who exposed government corruption.
But that makes you valuable to politicians and dangerous to the people you exposed.
We need to get you somewhere safe where you can decide what you want to do next.
Sarah looked around the room at these strangers who were offering to help her. A few days ago, she had been living a quiet life, focused on her work and her daughter. Now she was at the center of an international scandal, with people she had never met willing to risk their own safety to protect her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Maria smiled, and, for the first time in days, Sarah saw genuine warmth instead of threat or manipulation.
Because sometimes ordinary people have to do extraordinary things, Maria said.
And because Marcus Thompson is our friend. He risked everything to expose the truth, and you risked everything to help him.
That makes you family.
As they prepared to leave the auto shop, Sarah realized that her old life was over. There would be no going back to the quiet routine of work and home, no pretending that she didn't know what she now knew. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. She looked at Emma, who was chatting excitedly with one of Maria's team members about the cool trucks. Her daughter was resilient and adaptable, qualities she would need in the uncertain days ahead. Sarah Martinez had set out to save one man's life and ended up changing the world. Now she had to figure out how to live in the world she had helped create, and how to protect the people she loved while the powerful enemies she had made decided what to do next. The hunt was far from over, but at least now she wasn't running alone.
The safe house was not what Sarah had expected.
Instead of some hidden bunker or abandoned warehouse, Maria Santos led them to a ranch-style home in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Denver. It looked completely ordinary from the outside, the kind of place where families barbecued on weekends and kids rode bicycles in the driveway. But once they were inside, Sarah realized that appearances could be deceiving.
The windows were reinforced with bulletproof glass.
The basement had been converted into a communications center with multiple computer stations and radio equipment. Most telling of all were the people who lived there. "Welcome to the Underground Railroad 2.0, said a large man with a graying beard who introduced himself as John Bear Williams.
"Though instead of helping slaves escape to freedom, we help military personnel escape from their own government when that government has lost its way."
Bear had been a Marine for 20 years before discovering that some of his missions weren't what he had been told they were. When he tried to report what he had seen, he found himself facing court-martial on trumped-up charges. He had managed to escape before his trial and had been living off the grid ever since, helping other whistleblowers find safety.
"How many people know about this place?"
Sarah asked as Maria showed her and Emma to a comfortable bedroom.
"Fewer than you might think," Maria said. "But more than the government would like.
We're part of a network that spans the entire country, made up of former military personnel, intelligence officers, journalists, and ordinary citizens who believe that the truth matters more than politics."
Sarah was amazed by the organization's sophistication.
They had secure communication networks, safe houses in multiple cities, and connections to international human rights organizations.
It was like discovering that there was an entire shadow world operating parallel to the official one. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah finally got the reunion she had been hoping for.
Marcus Thompson arrived at the safe house, looking much better than when she had found him bleeding in the alley. His wounds were healing, and the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by something that looked like hope.
"I can't thank you enough,"
Marcus said when they sat down to talk in the living room.
"If you hadn't helped me that morning, none of this would have been possible." "I just did what any nurse would do," Sarah said.
"No," Marcus replied firmly. "You did what any decent human being should do, but very few people would have had the courage to keep going when things got dangerous. You could have thrown away that flash drive and pretended none of this ever happened. Instead, you risked everything to make sure the truth came out." Marcus told Sarah the full story of how he had discovered the conspiracy. He had been part of a special operations team attached to Operation Nightfall, believing they were conducting counter-terrorism missions in Afghanistan. It took him months to realize that they were actually working as muscle for the Cerberus Group, a private military contractor that was using the war as cover for illegal activities. We weren't fighting terrorists, Marcus explained. We were intimidating local leaders who wouldn't cooperate with Cerberus's resource extraction operations. We were eliminating witnesses to war crimes. We were stealing artifacts and selling them to private collectors.
Everything we did was about money, not national security.
When Marcus tried to report what he had discovered, he found that the corruption went much higher than he had imagined. His commanding officer was on the Cerberus payroll. So were people in the Pentagon, the State Department, and even Congress. That's when I realized I couldn't work through official channels, Marcus said. I had to gather enough evidence to expose the entire network at once, or they would just silence me and continue operating. For 6 months, Marcus had carefully documented Cerberus group activities while pretending to be a loyal soldier. He copied files, recorded conversations, and took photographs of evidence that would later become the smoking gun that brought down the conspiracy. But someone figured out what I was doing, Marcus continued.
During my last mission, my own team turned on me.
They shot me and left me for dead in a bombed-out building. I barely managed to escape and make it back to the United States.
How did you find me? Sarah asked.
I didn't, Marcus said with a smile.
You found me.
But after you helped me, I had Maria's team keep an eye on you to make sure you stayed safe. When we realized you had the flash drive and that government agents were threatening you, we knew we had to act.
Maria joined their conversation, carrying a laptop computer. The situation is evolving quickly, she said. The story you helped break is having a bigger impact than we expected. She showed them news reports from around the world. The Operation Nightfall scandal was front-page news in dozens of countries.
International human rights organizations were calling for investigations. Several foreign governments were demanding explanations for American military activities on their soil.
But the domestic reaction was more complicated.
While many news organizations were covering the story responsibly, others were attacking Sarah's credibility and questioning the authenticity of the leaked documents. Some politicians were calling her a traitor, while others were hailing her as a hero. The people behind this conspiracy aren't going down without a fight, Bear explained when he joined them. They have billions of dollars at stake, and they're using every resource they have to discredit the evidence and silence anyone who speaks out. As if to prove his point, Maria's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, her face growing serious. We have a problem, she said. Tony Valdez, the computer programmer who helped you upload the files, was found dead in his apartment an hour ago. The police are calling it a suicide, but our sources say it looks more like professional elimination. Sarah felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Tony had risked his life to help her, and now he was dead because of it. This is my fault, she whispered.
No, Marcus said firmly. This is their fault. Tony knew the risks when he agreed to help. He made the same choice you made, the choice to do the right thing even when it was dangerous.
But the news got worse.
Maria's contacts reported that several other people connected to the story were being pressured by government agents.
A journalist who had written about the leaked documents found his sources drying up overnight. A former Cerberus employee who had spoken to investigators suddenly recanted his testimony and disappeared. They're cleaning house, Bear said grimly. Eliminating anyone who can connect them to the crimes that were exposed. Sarah realized that her decision to expose the truth had put countless innocent people in danger.
What have I done? She asked.
You've given us a chance to win, said a new voice from the doorway. Sarah turned to see a woman she didn't recognize, someone in her 50s with graying hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. Sarah Martinez, Maria said, I'd like you to meet Colonel Rebecca Hayes, U.S. Army, retired. Colonel Hayes shook Sarah's hand and sat down with the group.
I've been following your story with great interest, she said. And I think it's time you understood the bigger picture of what you've stumbled into.
Hayes explained that the corruption exposed in Operation Nightfall was just the tip of the iceberg. For years, a network of military contractors, government officials, and corporate executives had been using America's military involvement overseas as a way to enrich themselves. They started small, skimming money from reconstruction contracts and taking kickbacks from equipment purchases.
But success made them bolder. Eventually, they weren't content to just profit from existing conflicts, Hayes said.
They started creating conflicts, manipulating intelligence reports, and prolonging wars to maximize their profits. American soldiers were dying not to protect freedom or democracy, but to increase stock prices and quarterly earnings. The Cerberus Group was at the center of this network, but they weren't the only ones involved. Hayes showed them charts and diagrams that mapped out connections between dozens of companies and hundreds of individuals, all profiting from a system that had turned America's military into a private army for corporate interests.
People like Marcus have been trying to expose this for years, Hayes continued.
But they were always working alone, trying to fight a system that was bigger than any individual could handle. Your actions changed that equation.
How? Sarah asked.
By making the evidence public simultaneously through multiple channels, you created a crisis that the conspirators couldn't contain, Hayes explained. For the first time, they couldn't silence all the witnesses or suppress all the evidence.
They're exposed, and they know it. But exposure didn't mean defeat. The conspirators still had powerful allies and enormous resources.
Some were already trying to frame the scandal as the work of foreign enemies trying to damage American credibility. Others were claiming that the leaked documents were forgeries designed to undermine national security.
They're going to fight back hard, Colonel Hayes warned. And they're going to target anyone who stands in their way.
That's when Maria's secure phone buzzed again. This time, the message made her face go pale.
What is it? Bear asked.
They've arrested Miguel Santos, Maria said.
The auto shop is surrounded by federal agents. They're claiming he's part of an international terrorist network.
Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Miguel was the man who had helped her when she had nowhere else to turn. Now he was paying the price for her decisions. We have to help him, she said.
We will, Colonel Hayes said.
But first we need to understand what we're really up against. She showed them another document, this one marked with government security classifications. This came from our sources inside the Pentagon. It's a list of everyone the Cerberus Group considers a threat to their continued operations. Sarah's name was at the top of the list, followed by Marcus, Maria, Bear, and dozens of other people she had never heard of. Next to each name were detailed files containing personal information, photographs, and what looked like target assessments.
This isn't just about discrediting witnesses anymore, Hayes said. They're planning something much more aggressive. What kind of aggressive? Marcus asked.
The kind that makes people disappear permanently, Bear said grimly. Sarah looked around the room at the people who had risked their lives to protect her and her daughter. She thought about Miguel Santos sitting in a jail cell because he had tried to help her. She thought about Tony Valdez, dead because he had believed in doing the right thing. This has to stop, she said.
I can't let more people get hurt because of me.
You're right, Colonel Hayes agreed. It has to stop. But not by you giving up or backing down.
It stops by us finishing what you started. What do you mean?
Hayes smiled, and Sarah saw steel in her eyes.
I mean, we're going to take down the entire network. All of it.
Every person, every company, every corrupt official who has profited from turning America's military into their personal money-making machine.
How?
The same way you exposed Operation Nightfall, Hayes said. By gathering evidence, building an unshakable case, and making it impossible for them to hide the truth. Maria opened her laptop and showed Sarah a new set of files. We've been working on this for months, but we needed something to break the story open.
Your actions gave us that opening. Now we can move to the next phase.
The files contained evidence of corruption spanning decades, involving military operations around the world. There were bank records showing billions of dollars in illegal transactions, communications proving coordination between government officials and private contractors, and testimony from dozens of whistleblowers who had been silenced or ignored. This is massive, Sarah said, scrolling through document after document. It has to be massive, Colonel Hayes explained. If we only expose part of the network, they'll just cut off the exposed parts and continue operating. We have to expose all of it at once, make it impossible for them to survive the scandal. But, to do that, they needed more than just documents and testimony. They needed someone who could serve as the public face of the investigation, someone the American people would trust to tell them the truth.
That's where you come in, Maria said to Sarah. Me? I'm just a nurse. I don't know anything about military operations or government corruption.
Exactly, Colonel Hayes said.
You're not a politician or an activist or someone with an agenda.
You're an ordinary American who stumbled onto something terrible and chose to do the right thing.
That makes you the most credible witness we have.
Sarah felt overwhelmed by the responsibility they were asking her to accept.
What would I have to do? Testify before Congress, Hayes said. Tell your story to the media. Put a human face on this scandal so the American people understand what's really at stake. And, what happens to my daughter while I'm doing all this? What happens to the people helping me?
We protect each other, Bear said simply.
The same way we've been doing for years.
The same way you protected Marcus when you found him in that alley. Sarah looked around the room at these brave people who had already sacrificed so much to fight for the truth. She thought about Marcus, who had risked his life to expose war crimes. She thought about Maria and Bear and Colonel Hayes, who had given up their normal lives to help people like her.
She thought about Miguel Santos, sitting in jail because he had helped a stranger in need.
And she thought about Emma, sleeping peacefully upstairs, trusting her mother to keep her safe in a dangerous world.
If I do this, Sarah said, if I agree to be the public face of this investigation, I need guarantees that my daughter will be protected no matter what happens to me.
You have my word, Colonel Hayes said solemnly.
And mine, added Maria and Bear simultaneously.
Marcus reached over and took Sarah's hand.
You saved my life when you had every reason to walk away, he said. Now let us help you save a lot more lives. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. Okay. Let's finish what we started.
Outside the safe house, federal agents were setting up surveillance positions, preparing for what they thought would be a simple arrest operation. They had no idea that the ordinary-looking house contained the command center for an operation that would bring down some of the most powerful people in Washington. The real fight was just beginning, and Sarah Martinez was about to discover that being a hero meant more than just doing the right thing in a moment of crisis. It meant accepting the consequences of that choice and seeing it through to the end, no matter how dangerous the path ahead might be.
The next morning brought news that changed everything.
Sarah woke to find Colonel Hayes, Maria, and Bear gathered around multiple computer screens in the basement communications center, their faces grim with concentration.
What's happening? Sarah asked as she came downstairs with Emma.
They're accelerating their timeline, Colonel Hayes said without looking up from her screen.
Miguel Santos died in custody last night.
The official story is that he had a heart attack, but our medical sources say the symptoms are consistent with poisoning. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Miguel Santos was dead because he had helped her. Another innocent person had paid the ultimate price for her decision to expose the truth. I'm sorry, Hayes continued, but there's more. 3 more witnesses from our list were found dead in the past 12 hours. 2 apparent suicides and 1 car accident. All of them had agreed to testify about Cerberus group activities. They're not just discrediting witnesses anymore, Bear said angrily.
They're eliminating them.
Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the violence.
How many people are going to die because of what I did? How many people have already died because of what they were doing? Marcus asked, entering the room with a laptop under his arm.
Sarah, Miguel Santos knew the risks when he chose to help you.
So did Tony Valdez. So did those 3 witnesses.
They all made the same choice you made, to fight for the truth even when it was dangerous. Marcus set up his laptop and showed them new intelligence he had gathered overnight.
The Cerberus group is in full panic mode. They're liquidating assets, moving money offshore, and activating sleeper cells they've had in place for years.
Sleeper cells?
Sarah asked.
People in government agencies, law enforcement, and the military who have been taking Cerberus money for years, Hayes explained. They're calling in every favor, pressuring every asset, and using every resource they have to shut down our investigation. The scope of their influence was staggering. Sarah saw lists of names that included senators, federal judges, police chiefs, and high-ranking military officers. All of them were on the Cerberus payroll, all of them had reason to want the truth buried. But they made a critical mistake, Maria said, pointing to intercepts of encrypted communications. They're so focused on silencing witnesses that they're exposing their own network. Every move they make to shut us down reveals another connection, another conspiracy. Bear pulled up surveillance footage from around the country. Look at this. Coordinated raids on safe houses in 7 cities, all happening within hours of each other. This level of coordination requires central planning and enormous resources. They're confirming everything we've been saying about how deep this conspiracy goes. That's when Sarah realized what her role needed to be. We need to get ahead of their narrative, she said. They're going to claim that anyone who dies is either a terrorist or a traitor. We need to tell their real stories before they can be twisted. Colonel Hayes nodded approvingly. Exactly. But that means going public, fully public, in a way that makes it impossible for them to silence you. What do you have in mind? Hayes showed Sarah a secure communication from an unexpected ally. Senator Catherine Morrison, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. She's been investigating Cerberus group activities for months, but she needed evidence. Your leak gave her the ammunition she needed. Senator Morrison was proposing emergency hearings that would be broadcast live on television. The hearings would allow Sarah and other witnesses to testify under congressional protection, making it much harder for Cerberus to eliminate them without creating an even bigger scandal. When would this happen? Sarah asked. 3 days, Hayes said. But we need to survive that long, and we need to gather more evidence before the hearings begin. That's when alarms started going off in the communications center. Maria rushed to her monitoring station and started typing rapidly. We have company, she announced. Federal vehicles approaching from 3 directions. They'll be here in less than 5 minutes. Is this a raid? Sarah asked, her heart racing. Probably, Bear said, already moving toward a weapons locker. But it might be a rescue. Colonel Hayes has allies in the government who know we're here. Hayes was on her secure phone, speaking rapidly to someone in Washington. I need confirmation on Operation Sanctuary, she said. Are these our people or their people? While they waited for an answer, Maria was coordinating evacuation procedures. Sarah realized that this ordinary suburban house had been designed with multiple escape routes and contingency plans. Sarah, take Emma to the safe room in the basement, Maria ordered. If shooting starts, stay there until someone comes to get you. But, before Sarah could move, Colonel Hayes held up her hand. Stand down, she said. These are friendlies. Senator Morrison sent a protective detail. The vehicles that pulled up to the house contained not federal agents, but U.S. Marshals assigned to witness protection. The lead marshal, a woman named Deputy Marshal Jennifer Chen, explained that they had orders to transport Sarah and her daughter to a secure location before the congressional hearings. We've had intelligence that Cerberus operatives are planning to eliminate you before you can testify, Chen explained. Senator Morrison wants you in protective custody until this is over. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Sarah realized how much her life had changed in just a few days. She had gone from being an ordinary nurse to being someone important enough to warrant federal protection. It was a responsibility she had never wanted and wasn't sure she was ready for. But, as they loaded into the armored vehicles, Marcus pulled her aside. I need to tell you something, he said. The flash drive you found in your medical bag wasn't the only evidence I gathered. There's more, much more, hidden in locations around the country. But I can't retrieve it alone. What kind of evidence? Financial records that prove the conspiracy goes back 15 years. Video testimony from military personnel who were killed before they could speak out officially. proof that several terrorist attacks were allowed to happen because they benefited Cerberus Group interests.
Sarah stared at him. You're talking about evidence that could bring down dozens of powerful people. Exactly. But it's too dangerous for me to retrieve alone. They know I'm alive now, and they're watching for me everywhere. What do you need me to do?
Some of the evidence is hidden in hospitals, Marcus explained. Places where a nurse could access areas that would be suspicious for someone like me. I need your help to retrieve it before the hearings. Sarah looked at Emma, who was chatting excitedly with one of the marshals about their bulletproof vehicle. Her daughter thought this was all an exciting adventure, not understanding the real danger they were in.
It's too risky, Sarah said. If something happened to me, Emma would be alone.
If we don't get this evidence, Cerberus will survive the congressional hearings, Marcus said. They'll sacrifice a few low-level operatives, claim the worst abuses were carried out by rogue actors, and continue operating under a different name. All those people who died to expose the truth will have died for nothing. Colonel Hayes approached them.
What are you two discussing?
Marcus explained about the additional evidence, and Hayes listened with growing interest. This changes our strategy completely, she said.
If we can present ironclad evidence of a 15-year conspiracy, the hearings become more than just an investigation. They become a reckoning. Sarah looked around at the people who had risked everything to help her.
She thought about Miguel Santos and Tony Valdez, who had died trying to protect her and her daughter. She thought about the families in those videos from Afghanistan, innocent people who had been killed for corporate profits.
What would I have to do? She asked.
Marcus pulled out a tablet computer and showed her a map with several marked locations.
4 hospitals in 3 states.
The evidence is hidden in places only medical personnel would have access to, usually in supply rooms or equipment storage areas that require badge access.
How did you hide evidence in hospitals?
I had help, Marcus said. Other medical personnel who were part of the military operations, people who saw what I saw and wanted to preserve evidence but couldn't speak out themselves.
Sarah studied the map.
2 of the hospitals were in Colorado, 1 in Kansas, and 1 in New Mexico. All of them were places where she could potentially gain access by claiming to be a visiting nurse or temporary employee.
The hearings are in 3 days, she said. Could we retrieve all the evidence in time?
If we start immediately and work around the clock, Maria said, joining the conversation. But it would be incredibly dangerous. Cerberus knows about some of these locations, and they'll be watching for anyone trying to access them. Deputy Marshal Chen had been listening to their conversation, and she stepped forward. I can't officially authorize a mission like this, she said.
But I can make sure you have backup wherever you go. Unofficially.
Colonel Hayes was already working on logistics.
We'll need a medical cover story, false identification, and extraction plans for each location.
It's possible, but barely. Sarah made her decision. Emma stays in protective custody. I won't risk her safety.
But if this evidence can prevent more people from dying, then we have to try.
Over the next several hours, they planned the most important mission of Sarah's life. She would pose as a traveling nurse consultant, visiting each hospital to conduct equipment assessments. Her real mission would be to retrieve the evidence Marcus had hidden and get it back to Colonel Hayes for analysis. The first hospital was in Colorado Springs, just 2 hours from Denver. Sarah's fake identification identified her as a consultant from a medical equipment company, conducting inspections for insurance purposes. It was a thin cover story, but it would give her legitimate access to the areas where Marcus had hidden evidence. As they drove toward Colorado Springs, Sarah felt a mixture of fear and determination. She was no longer just a witness to corruption, she was actively fighting against it. Every mile brought her closer to evidence that could change everything, but also closer to the people who would do anything to stop her. Remember, Maria said over the radio, you're not just retrieving files. You're honoring the memory of everyone who died trying to expose this conspiracy.
Miguel Santos, Tony Valdez, all those witnesses who were silenced. They're counting on you to finish what they started. At Colorado Springs Memorial Hospital, Sarah's hands shook as she badged into the supply room where Marcus had told her to look. Hidden inside a box of medical equipment that hadn't been opened in months, she found a waterproof container holding dozens of documents and several data storage devices. The documents she glimpsed made her sick. They were after-action reports from military operations, describing the deliberate targeting of civilians and the systematic destruction of evidence. The data devices contained video files that she didn't have time to review, but their file names told a horrific story of war crimes covered up at the highest levels. Package retrieved, she whispered into her radio as she left the hospital. But, as she walked to her car, Sarah noticed a black sedan following her at a distance. Cerberus operatives had found her. "We have a tail," she reported to Maria. "Confirmed," came Bear's voice over the radio. "We see them. Take Route 25 north and drive normally. We'll handle it." Sarah had never been in a car chase before, but she followed Bear's instructions carefully. As she drove north on the highway, the black sedan moved closer, apparently preparing to force her off the road. That's when two pickup trucks appeared from nowhere, boxing in the sedan and forcing it to stop. Sarah didn't look back as she continued toward the second hospital, but she heard Bear's voice on the radio, "Tail neutralized. Proceed to next objective." The second Colorado hospital yielded even more evidence, including financial records that traced Cerberus Group payments directly to Pentagon officials. But it also brought more danger. As Sarah left the building, she spotted federal agents surrounding the area. "This is a trap," she told Maria over the radio. "Negative," came Colonel Hayes' voice. "Those are our people. Senator Morrison's security detail. They're making sure you get out safely." The Kansas and New Mexico retrievals went more smoothly, partly because Sarah was getting better at her cover story and partly because Colonel Hayes was coordinating with more federal agencies to provide protection. By the time they returned to the safe house, Sarah had retrieved evidence that filled several boxes. Colonel Hayes and her team worked through the night analyzing everything, building the case that would be presented at the congressional hearings. "This is devastating," Hayes said as she reviewed the files. "We have proof of systematic war crimes, evidence of bribery and corruption going back 15 years, and documentation showing that several terrorist attacks could have been prevented but weren't because Cerberus Group profited from the resulting conflicts. But the evidence came with a terrible cost." While Sarah was retrieving files, Cerberus operatives had been eliminating the medical personnel who had helped Marcus hide them. 3 nurses and 2 doctors were found dead in apparent accidents and suicides. "They're cleaning house," Maria said grimly. "Making sure no one can corroborate Marcus's story." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Every piece of evidence they gathered seemed to come at the cost of someone's life. How many more people would die before this was over? "The hearings start tomorrow," Colonel Hayes said. "Are you ready?" Sarah looked at the mountain of evidence they had assembled, thought about all the people who had died to gather it, and nodded. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's end this." But ending it would require one final confrontation with forces that had killed dozens of people to protect their secrets. The congressional hearings would be broadcast live to the world, making it impossible for Cerberus to silence Sarah without creating an even bigger scandal. Unless, of course, they were desperate enough to try anyway. As Sarah prepared her testimony for the next day, federal agents were receiving intelligence about a planned attack on the Capitol building. Cerberus Group had decided that if they couldn't silence the witnesses, they would eliminate the entire congressional committee investigating them. The final battle for the truth was about to begin, and Sarah Martinez was about to discover that being a hero meant more than just surviving danger. It meant walking into it voluntarily, knowing that other people's lives depended on your courage. Tomorrow, the whole world would be watching. And Sarah would have to decide whether she was ready to risk everything one more time to make sure the truth finally came to light. Sarah woke before dawn on the morning of the congressional hearings, her stomach tight with nervousness. In a few hours, she would sit before the Senate Intelligence Committee and tell her story to the world. Everything she had been through, everything she had learned, all came down to this moment. Through her hotel window, she could see the Capitol building in the distance,
its dome catching the first light of sunrise. Somewhere in that building, Senator Morrison and her committee were preparing to hear testimony that could bring down one of the most powerful conspiracy in modern American history.
But Sarah wasn't thinking about politics or conspiracies.
She was thinking about Emma, who was still asleep in the next room under the protection of Deputy Marshal Chen. Her daughter had been through so much over the past week, uprooted from her normal life and thrust into a world of danger and uncertainty.
"Mommy, are you going to be on TV today?" Emma asked when she woke up.
"Yes, sweetheart.
I'm going to tell some important people about what happened to us." "Are the bad people going to stop being bad after you tell on them?"
Sarah wished she could give her daughter a simple answer.
"I hope so, Emma.
That's why it's important for me to tell the truth, even when it's scary."
Emma hugged her tightly. "You're the bravest person I know, Mommy."
At the Capitol building, security was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Federal agents, Capitol Police, and military personnel were positioned at every entrance and corridor. Colonel Hayes had warned her that intelligence agencies had detected chatter about possible attacks during the hearings, but the show would go on.
"They're desperate," Hayes had explained the night before. "Desperate people do desperate things."
But they've also made a critical mistake.
By threatening a congressional hearing, they've confirmed everything we've been saying about how dangerous they are.
In the witness preparation room, Sarah reviewed her testimony one final time. She had decided to tell her story simply and directly, starting with the morning she found Marcus bleeding in the alley and ending with her decision to speak out despite the dangers. Remember, Senator Morrison told her during their brief meeting, "You're not on trial here. You're here to help the American people understand what happened and why it matters." Senator Morrison was younger than Sarah had expected, maybe 45, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that had seen too much. She had been investigating military contractor abuses for years, but the evidence Sarah and Marcus had provided gave her the ammunition she needed to finally hold public hearings.
"There are people on this committee who don't want the truth to come out," Morrison warned. "Some of them have financial connections to the companies we're investigating. Others are ideologically opposed to questioning military operations. They're going to try to discredit you."
"How?" "They'll claim you're a traitor who endangered national security. They'll question your motives and suggest you're part of some foreign conspiracy.
They'll try to make this about you instead of about the evidence." Sarah nodded.
She had expected this.
"What should I do?"
"Tell the truth.
Stick to the facts. Don't let them bait you into arguments. And remember that the American people are watching. They'll recognize honesty when they hear it." When Sarah entered the hearing room, she was amazed by how many people were there.
Every seat was filled with reporters, government officials, and members of the public who had won lottery slots to attend. Television cameras were positioned around the room, broadcasting the proceedings live to the world. At the witness table sat Sarah, Marcus, and Colonel Hayes. Across from them, Senator Morrison and 14 other committee members prepared to hear their testimony. Some of the senators looked supportive, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile.
"This hearing will come to order," Senator Morrison announced.
"Today we will hear testimony about allegations of systematic corruption, war crimes, and conspiracy involving private military contractors and government officials. The witnesses before us have risked their lives to bring this information forward, and they deserve our respect and protection." But before Morrison could continue, Senator Richard Hawkins, a committee member known for his hawkish foreign policy views, interrupted. "Madam Chair, I must object to the characterization of these witnesses as heroes. From what I've read in the classified briefings, we're dealing with individuals who stole classified information and leaked it to foreign agents.
This hearing is a platform for treason, not truth-telling."
Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but she remembered Senator Morrison's advice. She would let her testimony speak for itself.
Marcus was called to testify first.
He told his story with military precision, describing his service record, the missions he had been assigned, and his gradual realization that Operation Nightfall was not what he had been told it was. I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, Marcus said. When I discovered that my own commanders were using American military power to enrich private corporations at the cost of innocent lives, I had to act on that oath.
Senator Hawkins was relentless in his questioning.
Staff Sergeant Thompson, you admit to stealing classified documents and leaking them to unauthorized persons.
By any definition, that makes you a traitor.
No, sir, Marcus replied calmly.
It makes me a whistleblower.
The documents I preserved showed evidence of war crimes and corruption.
I had a legal and moral obligation to report these activities. To your chain of command, not to the media. I tried that, Senator.
My immediate superior was on the Cerberus Group payroll. When I attempted to file official reports, I was threatened with court-martial and, then, targeted for assassination by my own unit. The exchanges continued for hours, with committee members sharply divided along political lines. Some focused on the evidence of corruption and war crimes, while others questioned Marcus's loyalty and motives.
Then, it was Sarah's turn.
Miss Martinez, Senator Morrison began, please tell us in your own words how you became involved in this matter. Sarah had practiced her testimony dozens of times, but, sitting in front of the cameras and the committee, she felt the weight of the moment. She thought about Miguel Santos, who had died trying to help her. She thought about Tony Valdez, who had given his life to make sure the truth came out. She thought about all the innocent people who had been killed by the conspiracy she was about to expose. I'm a trauma nurse, she began, her voice steady despite her nervousness.
On Tuesday morning, October 15th, I found a wounded soldier in the alley beside my apartment building. I did what any medical professional would do. I tried to help him.
Sarah told her story simply and directly, describing how she had treated Marcus's wounds, how government agents had threatened her family, and how she had made the decision to preserve and release the evidence Marcus had given her. I want to be clear about something, Sarah said, looking directly at the cameras.
I'm not a political person. I don't work for any government agency or foreign power.
I'm a single mother who works as a nurse and tries to do the right thing.
When I found evidence of war crimes being committed in America's name, I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. Senator Hawkins immediately went on the attack.
Miss Martinez, you had no authority to review classified documents or to make decisions about national security.
You're a nurse, not an intelligence analyst. How can you possibly judge what information should be made public?
I can judge right from wrong, Sarah replied.
I've seen the videos, Senator.
I've seen American soldiers killing civilians and destroying evidence.
I've seen financial records showing government officials taking bribes from military contractors.
You don't need to be an intelligence analyst to know that's wrong. You've endangered ongoing operations and put American lives at risk by leaking classified information. Sarah felt her temper rising, but she kept her voice calm. The only American lives I put at risk were those of corrupt officials and war criminals.
The operations I exposed weren't protecting American lives.
They were ending innocent lives for profit. The questioning continued for hours, with Sarah facing skeptical and sometimes hostile questions from several committee members. But she stuck to the facts, calmly explaining what she had seen and why she had made the decisions she had made. Then, Colonel Hayes was called to testify about the broader implications of the evidence.
As a former high-ranking military officer with an impeccable service record, she was harder for critics to dismiss.
The evidence presented in this hearing shows a systematic corruption of American military operations spanning more than a decade, Hayes testified.
We're not talking about isolated incidents or rogue actors.
We're talking about a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government and involves billions of dollars in illegal profits. Hayes presented charts and financial records that traced money from private military contracts through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, ultimately ending up in the bank accounts of government officials, military officers, and corporate executives. This is not just about corruption, Hayes continued.
This is about the fundamental purpose of America's military.